final session, the conversation part. And after the conversation part led by Eskil Narenbakken and Carl, we will have something to eat and drink and just relax after an exhaustive day of learning a lot of things. Okay?
Okay, we have had a long, instructive, interesting, and fantastic day. So now we're into the relaxed, laid-back session. We will just sort of round up, see what we can take on from this day, this event. So I will not ask any new or difficult questions. Basically, I have just a short set of questions with more or less self-evident answers, but I would like you to just elaborate and reflect a little on it. The title of this seminar is The Joy of Beauty, and it's a memorial event for James Stephens Curl. It's also a marking of a culture that needs to be continued. I'd like to start with, it's a saying or a quotation that we sometimes use in Norway. It says that a giant went through the land. And when giants go through the land, they leave some traces. So the question becomes, what traces are the main traces left by James Stephens Curl? Of course, this is a very wide question, but if I simplify it, what is the main traces here from James? Is it his work as an historian, or is it as a critic? Please, if you start, Nir.
Could I be the last?
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think there's a distinction. I think to be a good critic, you also have to be an historian. In other words, in what we do, and actually I would say generally, if you don't have an understanding of the history of what you're doing, just forget it. In fairness, modernists also have this view, but their history starts in about 1919. But nonetheless, James's point of criticism was that he really understood the history.
Well, I think that the trace that he made, for me, was that he did his research. You know, he did his homework, and there you have it. You have the book, Making Dystopia, and to me it's the definitive version of modernism in architecture, because I trust James, because he did the homework.
Mm-hmm. I think that he obviously left great books behind. He did the research, and you do need to know your history if you're going to be speaking to it. But I think that he was really passionate about the application of the knowledge. And in that email that you mentioned, I didn't know it had existed. But the idea of creating the institutions for the future practice of what is real architecture, because what is being called architecture today actually has nothing to do with architecture. The structures that are being produced are not even identified by the human brain as buildings. Buildings have to show some indication of having the touch of a human hand in their making. And the whole purpose of the modernist story is to not show that hand. So I think that the institutional idea that he put out, I think, might be his most significant.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
To that, you know, something very practical, that in the UK, most architects are a member of the RIBA, and you know, if you look at it purely from the point of view of money and the subscription that we pay annually, I mean, sometimes it can be £700. You know, you pay your own personal subscription, and then you pay one for the practice. You know, to me, and I left the RIBA. I'm not a member. The RIBA, I find, is a very cold place for architects who want to produce buildings of beauty. So why would I pay money to an organization that isn't actually actively supporting what I do?
I'll tell you some stories about that. I'm sorry, this is going to be very British for a moment. Because I was the honorary secretary of the RIBA at one stage in my career. And at that moment, because I had certain powers, I was able to create the Traditional Architecture Group, which is technically a branch of the RIBA. But the RIBA has been trying to deny this ever since. Or every time there's a new, because I'm involved with the architectural establishment, every time there's a new election for the president, not the last two presidents, I have to say, but before that, I would ask the candidates if they would support traditional architecture when they became the president. And they always say yes, and they never do, because it's not just them, it's an institution. The way that they promote themselves, and this is probably common to other architects, they have, they have an awards system, which is basically the awards are only given to the right kind of building. And quite naturally and reasonably, they use those awards to promote the institution. So it's a completely circular process. I'm not quite as negative as you are, I have to say, but for obvious reasons, because I was an elected councillor twice and also an honorary secretary.
Well,
Yes.
I've been a member of the AIA several times. I personally don't think that I got any benefit from being a member. And I think that the sales job they've done is that they have told people, actually it's not correct, that you need to be AIA if you're that an architect is AIA. Actually, architects are licensed by the states. So I am RA, registered architect. I don't have to be AIA to show that I'm an architect. And people don't know that. But they keep that, you know, they don't say that it's just a club. And what it does for the standard person, standard architect out there in the field, of which the vast majority are, is absolutely nothing.
I think the bigger point, which I mean, we can talk about our own national institutions forever. The bigger point is, do you try and make the change from within, or do you try and make the change from without? And that is the big question. I'm a within person. I mean, other people might be a without person, because I've been involved with the architect. I mean, well-known modernists are good friends of mine. So much as James found disgusting, they are. But I'm a reform within person, not a reform from without person.
Which leads to my next question, if we keep this to Mr. Curl. If we look at his bibliography, we have a 2-digit number of classical books, historical books, and one book about criticism, architectural criticism. So we can wonder, when did he start to think that, no, I should write a book about architectural criticism against modernism? Of course, we have learned that this was, he didn't like this from the start. But another thing is to put a huge amount of work and actually publish a monumental work on this. When do you think he became fed up or started thinking that I need to write this book? At what stage is he in his career?
I think he always understood modernism as something that was detrimental to us, but he couldn't come off the fence until he wrote Making Dystopia, because he was doing the Oxford Dictionary of Architecture. He had to be dispassionate.
Until you actually read these sections. I actually went through the sections, and at the bottom of each one of those, apparently, actually there is a criticism. But it isn't interesting enough. And when the first book that I read, the 1970 book, he's actually quite nice about Corbusier. He's actually saying that the problem with modernist architecture is it's not as good as Corbusier was. So somewhere there was a road to Damascus experience where actually that point of view changed. But I think the point was made by one of our speakers earlier on, is that in his teaching he could be, in a discursive sense, be more tolerant than he was in writing.
Likely, that sounds very interesting. It's a good question. I actually had my realization that this was some kind of falsehood that has been perpetrated on a bunch of innocent people. When I was doing research for my PhD back in the 90s, I was teaching students. I started realizing that we're teaching them nonsense, and that there was, I was seeking a philosophy of architecture. There is none. It literally doesn't exist. I was seeking the theory of modernism. There actually is none. All you get is a series of opinions of people, most of them actually incoherently written. So the only place you can find out about modernism and what it is and what it stands for is from the critique of it that had been written all the way back to the 20s. And then, very oddly, there's one book out there that has been in circulation, is continuously published, The Architecture of Humanism by Geoffrey Scott. And if you take the word Gothic and change it for modern, it reads the same. And I found that very, very odd. It was a really good experience. And what all of these books have in common is that they enumerate the fallacies of the method, similar to what Embla was speaking about before. And there are about 30 such ideas that are all foundational studio ideas that we teach the students, or taught the students when I was doing modern design. So I found out about it in the mid-90s, but decided not to pursue it because I was going in a different direction. But I suppose that somewhere between then, because we hadn't heard about it, and when he published the book, that came out.
Okay, thank you. Another thing is when you have figures like James who make a sort of monumental contribution, you can wonder, where did he get his inspiration from? Who inspired him? Was it from the outside, or was he sort of, was it inherent? He was born with a kind of sensitivity to this? Yeah, if we just take one angle, was this a matter of he loved beauty? Or was it about cognitive reflection? He found out something? Or was it more like an instinct from childhood or something? That it's like Plato's true, beautiful, and the good. Which level are we on here? What inspired James, actually?
I just want to deal with the issue of beauty just for a moment, because it's become a very popular subject, and I've lectured on it and so on, and I won't bore you with that. But what's happened in Britain is that the idea that buildings should be beautiful has become published in government documents. So what's happening is that all the modernist architects are telling us that their buildings are beautiful. And if I hear anyone say beauty is in the eye of the beholder again, I think I'll run out of the room screaming. So I'll just do it now. So it's a tricky one, actually. It's got cultural connotations and so on. But in the end, you trust what most people think in a culture. And it's really that simple, because, I mean, in fairness to modernists, they do find cubic, bare buildings quite beautiful because they've trained themselves to do so.
Yes.
I mean, and you can't actually say they're wrong. It just is that most people don't agree with them. So the concept of beauty that's out there amongst the people is not the same. And that's in the end, that is our greatest strength. I have to say, if everyone turned around tomorrow, if there was a blinding flash from the sky from aliens, and everyone said, actually, modernist buildings are incredibly beautiful, and the majority of the population said that, my argument would disappear. But it doesn't.
I would add to that, Robert, that I haven't actually myself heard any modernists use the word beauty. They talk about design quality. And that worries me, because there's a push now to control the function of an architect. The name architect is protected under law, of course, in the UK, but now there's a push to control the function of an architect. And if that happens, I think there'll be a push to control design quality and to define design quality. And this is why I'm a without person. I think that we should have our own institute so that we can resist that, and that, a kind of Brexit, if you like, so that we can do our own thing, and that we can. Well, we're small in terms of the number of traditional architects there are around and classical architects. But look, if we use our subscriptions, give them to ourselves, we would have enough money amongst the traditional fraternity to employ at least one person, to have an office, and to push for what we do. And in particular, as I said earlier, to talk to house builders. Well, you don't have to talk to house builders because they love traditional architecture, but to talk to developers and to get the big jobs. That's my view, for what it's worth.
Well, I have a very particular view about, so this can go on for a long time. I have a very particular view about, because we did some research. It's very well established in Britain, and actually, interesting enough, there's an article Mike Bosa did in similar things in the Netherlands, is the minute people start to be able to control what they occupy, in other words, buy, they want traditional buildings. And it's interesting, this happened in the Netherlands. The Netherlands were a kind of nirvana of modernism, but actually it was because they were state-governed. The minute they took the state government out of it and people could buy their own houses, the architecture changed, developers changed. So what do you do about big buildings? The trouble with big buildings is that ordinary people don't buy them. Institutions buy them. And they're actually managed by real estate. And the real estate people don't give a damn about anything. They just they're only as good as their last sale. So they actually believe that people want glass wall buildings. They actually believe they want them. I don't believe they do. Interesting enough, the research we did was actually not so much on the builders of these buildings, but a lot of architects said to me, well, I know that's true about housing. People like traditional, but it's not true of other buildings. We did the research, good quality research. Actually, it's exactly the same. So I go back to the issue of James and scholarship, evidence, and in my opinion, if tomorrow we could show that the CEOs, the managing directors of the people that rent or build these buildings prefer traditional building, the market would change overnight, because the real estate people don't care. All they care, if they can actually have an edge and get a quicker sale, they'll do it. Actually, and I think that's probably the most important piece of research we can do at the moment.
Well, there is already proof for that. I want to make a plug for the Classic Planning Herald. This current issue, which just came out, and you can find a postcard out on the table out there, is about developers. It puts the developers front center, and the Robert A.M. Stern's. The 3 or 4 recent buildings, all traditional, their sales have been 20% better in terms of the cost or whatever it is than standard condo buildings. So we already know that. We know the preference of the people.
Yeah, because it will vary from market to market. In Britain, they're developed for rent and then they're rented. That's the normal pattern. So it'd be slightly careful moving from market to market. But the other thing is they claim they're more expensive. I designed a building on Piccadilly in London, which is a very traditional and classical building. It cost exactly the same amount per square meter, and it's got a lot of decoration on it, believe me. It costs exactly the amount per square meter as the guide price for any building in that location.
Absolutely.
So, there's a lot of... But if we want to change it, I think that's the critical thing that's left. We know it in housing. But actually, these big commercial and institutional buildings, you have to employ a major architect in order to do them. That's the other problem. You have to employ a big firm, and the big firms, I'm afraid, are not us.
Okay, if we round up here about my third theme, which is about impact. What impact does James Stevens Curl actually have had on whom? Now we're about 100 people or slightly less here. Is it just us who are interested and inspired, or is it a broad public? Or well, if I ask a different way, if someone comes to you and asks, which book from James Stevens Curl should I read? Which one would you recommend?
if I could start, I mean, obviously making dystopia. I think what he did, for me anyway, is that he pushed the Overton window with that. It was being pushed by others, but he came at the right time. He was criticized for coming at the wrong time. I think he came, it was very timely. And, just him with his scholarly approach to the subject matter, again, very, very trustworthy, said the right thing at the right time, and I think that gave people confidence, especially young people, to challenge, because it was happening, but he, as I say, came at the right time, and I think that the question was, repeat it again, please.
Specifically, if somebody on the street or somebody who heard of this seminar now asks you which book for Mr. Kroll should I read, which one?
Yes, exactly.
I'd agree with that, because, in fact, oddly enough, I was talking to actually Nicholas Boyd-Smith, who's actually currently reading it. It's a big tome, but about a third of it is references, actually, which shows its quality. So that's what I recommend. As to, I agree, it came at the right time. I think we have to be slightly more confident than we are. Actually, there's a shift taking place at the moment, but that shift is very slow. I just want to share one thing with you, if I may. Sorry, it's a story, but I think it's an important one. I used to sit on one of the British government design review committees, and we had a review from Danny Libeskind for a new building at the Victorian Albert Museum. And Danny Libeskind is a very charming presenter. We have to realize that. He's a very charming man. He's a very charming presenter. And he presented this scheme, and he kept saying, I'm making the future. Anyway, I knew this committee very well. I knew they all hated the building. But anyway, when we got together, they said, we can't stop this because he's making the future. And I said, I'm sorry, but the future hasn't happened yet. And if we say no, then we've made the future. But what was clear, and I think this is something we have to realize, it's what I call the tyranny of the radical. They were terrified of appearing to be reactionary. And if he kept saying he's making the future, they said, oh, well, the future's going to happen. And we appear to be stopping this future that's going to happen. And that was an interesting experience for me, because that committee of, quite reasonable people were really worried that they would appear to be reactionary. And that is one of our big problems, in my opinion.
Yes, it's really not being afraid. So making dystopia tells us how we got here, and it's a miserable story. I actually want to suggest that every 100 years or so, somebody writes a book about classical architecture that becomes a classic. And there are two that came out in the last 25 years or so. One of them is Bob's over here, and the other one is James's. I think the idea that after all this big Sturm und Drang of modernism, there's still really good books on how to make beautiful is very significant. And I believe that James's classical architecture is going to survive. I think that the landmark book is The Making Dystopia. The Survivor is going to be the classical architecture. It's just going to be a great handbook. Same way as we use Gibbs in the office, we also, hang out with the James book.
Yeah, that's actually the reasoning behind my previous question, which is his main production. Is it this critic, or is it actually an historian? It feels to me slightly like he's waking us up with this book, Dystopia, but then we have to go to his other books to see what should we actually have been doing. But just last question, very, very brief and perhaps personal. What is your main takeaway from this seminar, this day today?
I'm really impressed. The erudition, the quality of the conversation, the actual audience of people who are makers and thinkers is extraordinary. And I think we should have another one. Let's have one next year.
Well, I have to agree with that. And I think that's important, that this isn't the only memorial lecture, that we must have this every year. And I think it has kick-started it really well for the future.
For me, it's the collective. The fact that quite a lot of people here are quite a lot younger than me, that's a good start. And the second thing is what I loosely call the power of scholarship.
Okay. Thank you very much.